Through the Eyes of Artists by Nikki Grimes. An excerpt. Ariana, your complexion cries out for brush and canvas. I rush to gather raw umber, yellow ochre, the Indian red I love, pondering the perfect blend to capture you in this moment, certainly, but also for eternity. Perplexed, you're unable to fathom my fire, your worth. Who has taught you to disdain your brownness? Hi, my name is Mason Van Horn, and this is my multicultural author recommendation video. The phrase cut through the noise can mean anything. It can mean understanding your audience and their wants, presenting something different and unique, or simply be louder. When I consider this phrase, referencing literature, I perceive it to mean hearing the voice of the author clearly and gaining insight into a new perspective, despite the flood of information accessible to the reader otherwise. Studies have shown that less than 1 in 3 children's books published in the year 2020 were about a person of color, which includes African Americans, Indigenous peoples, Latinx, Arab, and Pacific Islanders. In multicultural literature, the term cutting through the noise can also mean defying the odds and getting published. One author who is consistently cutting through the noise in multicultural literature is Nikki Grimes. This New York Times best-selling author, Nikki Grimes, is the recipient of the 2020 Allen Award for Outstanding Contributions to Young Adult Literature, the 2017 Children's Literature Legacy Award, the 2016 Virginia Hamilton Literary Award, and the 2006 NCTE Award for Excellence in Poetry for Children. Her distinguished works include the much-honored books Garvey's Choice, ALA notable book Southwest Sunrise, and Coretta Scott King Award winner Bronx Masquerade. Her book Ordinary Hazards earned the Prince and Siebert Awards, and Boston Globehorn Book Honor was given for her book of Harlem Renaissance poetry, One Last Word. I was first introduced to Grimes' writing in the fall of 2020, which arguably was a difficult time for everyone. The first book I read of hers was Ordinary Hazards. Ordinary Hazards is a collection of poems forming a memoir of Grimes's childhood. Nikki Grimes was born on October 20th in 1950 to Bernice and James Grimes. She writes on herself, "As befits a poet of African American descent, I was born in Harlem, home of the Harlem Renaissance. When I was 13, I would give my first public poetry reading at the County Cullen Library, 1 block away from Harlem Hospital, where I came into the world." Grimes grew up in a broken household, one that did not last long. She described the life of a child nomad, moving from one family member's house to the next, and one foster home to another. Those experiences were hard, most of the time very unwelcoming. In her poems, she discussed topics of life in Harlem, mourning the loss of parents, both in death and in relationships, social justice issues, and accounts of assault against her and her family. While the memoir of her childhood is uniquely hers, Grimes's poems are inviting the reader to a new perspective or insight, a context that might not be their own. Yet the poems are so exceptionally relatable. One poem which had such a personal impact on me during a time where I was grieving was The Mystery of Memory, number 4. And this is just an excerpt from that poem. Where do memories hide? Who would imagine what the mere sight of ice skates might open? So many memories tucked away in the crevices of my mind all that time. Yes, this is the mystery of memory. I was so moved by this poem and others that I decided to write and share my experience with the author. Upon doing some research, I found an address for sending fan mail. I sent the letter in November of 2020. And in the spring of 2021 was surprised to find a package from Miss Grimes. The excitement that I had, it's just to receive a letter from Miss Grimes was immense. But she also sent me another book of poetry that she authored, which was written by her. And it specifically looks at Harlem Renaissance poetry and works about it. The book highlights the African American voice during such a pivotal age of African American literature, music, and art. Being the daughter of a musician herself, she encounters much of the thriving culture of this newly established era. In this book, Grimes shares poems of the greats like Langston Hughes, Georgia Douglas Johnson, and Jean Toomer, and among others, to share about the experience of growing up as a person of color in America. This book, I would advocate, is essential to the classroom because of its many benefits. In it, she discusses in detail the historical importance of the Harlem Renaissance, shares the perspective of both historical and current African American authors and illustrators, and teaches a method of poetry writing which Grimes utilizes frequently, called the Golden Shovel Method. The idea of the Golden Shovel Method is to take a short poem in its entirety or a line from a poem called a striking line and create a new poem using the words from its original, which you could see at the beginning of this video in Through the Eyes of Artists, which I bolded those words. Grimes' greatest successes, in my opinion, have been the way that she has made African American literature accessible to the reader, both of color and not. She has invited the reader into her world through works of poetry depicting the deepest hurts and the purest joys of life. She celebrates the African American culture and uses that platform to support new inspired writers in her community. In addition to being an incredibly talented and accoladed author, she is also a very kind human and desires to help learners continue doing that very thing, learn. In addition to her excellent books, Grimes has also conducted several interviews, developed various training tools focused on the Golden Shovel poetry method, and written to a wide variety of audiences, both to children and to adults. I would insist that you are not only going to purchase her books, but I would also add these to your local and school libraries because of the lessons of equity and respect she exhibits in her stories and in her own life. As a person, she is incredible. As an author, she is daring. And in all of those senses, she is continuing to cut through the noise. So, for all of those people interested in adding to their own collection of multicultural literature, I would absolutely recommend reading Nikki Grimes. Thank you for listening.